the reason is that they're buying software, specifically a CRM, because of its features and its benefits and all the cool things it could do. But what do they not have? They don't have the process.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Jason Kramer, my guest today, is the founder of Cultivize, a firm specializing in CRM and lead nurturing strategies. He brings over 20 years of marketing experience, including work with global brands and running his own agency. He founded Cultivize to help businesses align sales and marketing and improve conversion rates. Today, he helps companies identify gaps in their funnel and turn more prospects into customers. So we want to avoid that leaky funnel bucket, which we're going to talk about today. Jason, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to connect with you and excited to have you on the show. And, we were just talking offline about, in the M&A process, our clients are king, and we want to make sure that we're optimizing our outreach opportunities and dialing in our marketing efforts because we want to get those clients right. We want to find the business owner when they are ready to sell, which is very, very challenging. And a lot of times you have to nurture those relationships. We're going to dive into that as our main point of topic here today. But for our listeners, to kind of kick it off, Jason, tell us a little bit about your background in Cultivize and the work that you guys do.
Yeah, so I've always been a tinkerer all my life, Nick. I was the kid probably the only kid in my neighborhood had a workbench, in the garage. And so for me, you mentioned I did own an agency. I had that for 16 years. I come from the marketing background, but Cultivize, we're not a marketing agency. We don't do any lead gen. So my background and what I love to do is help fix the gaps and the broken processes that a lot of businesses have that they don't realize they have. And what I'm talking about, I know we'll dive into today, is about, what happens when the phone rings, someone fills out a form on your site, you meet somebody at an event, and what happens after that? And a lot of times, if it's not an immediate connection or an immediate need, it usually disappears. Not for no fault of anybody, it's the fault of not having the process. And that's what I love to help companies fix. And for me, I'm a process first person. Yes, I work in technology, but the technology can't work without the process.
So today, like I said in the intro, we're talking about a leaky bucket in the sales funnel. Why don't you just set the stage? What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is the mental compartmentalization of, I'll get to it tomorrow, I'll get to it next week, right? And we all do that. We try not to, but it's just human nature. And so that's the leaky bucket, right? Because you can't, if it's not written down somewhere, it's not on your calendar, it's not in a system, then remembering to do that one thing or those 15 things you need to do tomorrow, before lunch, usually doesn't happen. And that's where the leaks, really are paramount, because you're just trying to, juggle as much as you can in your head. And we all know you could only go so far with that approach.
Yeah. And I mean, well, I'm sure we'll hit on AI, but AI is everything. And, a lot of the things that we talk about internally here at Cornerstone International Alliances, look at the M&A process and where does that process break down? Where, from, lead gen all the way to deal close, there's a lot that can happen in that process. And so, and we were talking offline too, we talk about with our clients as well, as like, you got to have systems and processes in place. If you want to transition your business, it'll be a lot easier, might be at a higher value, and you have something to actually sell. So, where do you see most commonly, these opportunities prospecting or, finding the clients, in that sales funnel? Where do you see it most breaking down? Is it the top of the funnel, the qualification, the conversion? Where do you see that breaking down the most, and why?
It's more towards the beginning and the middle stages. If you're telling me, hey, Jason, I'm ready to sign a contract tomorrow, I should hope that I don't forget to send you that contract, right, and to follow up. But for the people that aren't ready to close, and maybe you've had that good conversation, or maybe you've never even had the conversation, it's somebody you met at an event or a cocktail hour, and they showed interest, but they're busy and we're all busy. And so you try a few times, you try a few weeks, you send an email, a text, whatever you do, reach out on LinkedIn, and you never speak to them. You either might make the assumption, okay, they're not interested, or you might just forget to follow up in a few more months down the road. And so that's where it happens most often. It's also the response time. I think in the M&A world, it's a little bit different because that's a longer sales cycle. You're not shopping online and calling, 10 different M&A firms and hiring one the first, few days or minutes after filling out a form. But nonetheless, it's all about the first impression. And sometimes we find that M&A firms and similar consulting type businesses are not quick to respond. And so somebody does reach out to them, a phone call or an email, and it might take them a day or two to respond. It doesn't leave a good first impression if it's taken that long to get back to a brand new potential client. So making sure you have those processes at the front of your lead cycle is really important, as well as the mid cycle where if they're not ready, what are you doing to follow up? And I guarantee, Nick, that, and we all do it, but if you go into your database, your Excel file, whatever you have today listening, and you look at all the people that you have in there that you've met in the last 12 months, how many of those people have you followed up with in the last 30 days? Probably not too many, and so you really want to make sure that there is something in there to make sure that all that effort you're doing, right, to meet these people, to start these conversations actually has some fruit at the end of the road.
Mm-hmm. What are, so you have this problem, you have this leaky bucket.
Mm-hmm.
What are some key metrics or signals that you think people can look at, kind of reflect and look in the mirror and be like, why is this happening? What are some key things that I need to really analyze in my process to make sure that I'm not losing out on opportunities, or I am following up, on a consistent, timely basis, and something that we can use maybe, today to fix that we can, plug that hole in that leaky bucket.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing for sure, and the easiest thing is looking at even, we've been 6 months in, right, to 2026 right now. Not sure when this will air, but now it's about 6 months in. So even if it's 7 months, the point is that there are people you've met this year that you may have wanted to follow up with that you forgot about. So if you go through that list of all the people you've met, even if it's old relationships, you started something new with a new conversation, new deal, how many of those people slipped through that you forgot to follow up with? I'm sure there's at least a half a dozen or a dozen people or more on that list that you should have followed up with. And the second part to that is, how are you following up and what are you following up with? I think is equally important. Asking people, hey, Nick, do you have any deals right now going on? Are you ready to sell the business? And it's all more sales focused. If someone's not ready and you keep asking them that question, even if it's every month, every 2 months, eventually they might get a little kind of annoyed by that, right? So my advice would be educate them, right? Prove to them why you're the best M&A consultant in the industry, and send them articles, even if you haven't written them. Share information, send them a book in the mail, whatever you can do to stay in front of them and show that you are the expert. When they are ready to buy, they'll be slightly more to buy from you than from a competitor at that point.
Mm-hmm. So you hit on, you meet a lead, whether it's through an email marketing campaign, whether it's at a conference. A lot of people in this industry get referrals from financial advisors and accountants and lawyers and business coaches or whoever, however that lead comes in. So you got this here's this person you need to connect with. What is the first step that you recommend people would do here to get it in a process to make sure that they're making that connection, introduction, and setting up that next step?
So if it were me, I would be putting it into my CRM because I have a CRM. If you don't have a CRM, hopefully using a spreadsheet or some system at the very least to keep yourself organized. That would be the first thing I do. I would also take a note to where did I meet that person? So 6 months, a year from now, I can reflect back, and it's not because I'm super smart and have a great memory. It's because I put a note and I'm like, hey, Nick, we met on LinkedIn. We met at this particular event. What did you think of the event? It's a re-conversation starter when you have those types of tidbits of information. And the next thing you want to do is, and again, B2B, right, which is my world, I connect with almost everybody on LinkedIn pretty much within a couple of days of meeting them. And what value there is if you are publishing content on LinkedIn, even if it's once a week, they could see your updates now that you're connected with them. So it's just another way to stay in front of them. And it's another connection point. I find people, you have your phone in your pocket. And so if there's a notification on LinkedIn, you send somebody a message, right, or a little video, they probably are more likely to see that than they are in email, right? Especially in the M&A world, they're getting hundreds of emails every, given week. So that is the most important part, is putting it in some type of database or some type of spreadsheet. Connecting with them on LinkedIn, I think, is a huge miss that a lot of people don't think about. Sending them an invite and then sending them something thoughtful, I mean, whether it's trying to get together for coffee or just having a meeting over video, but whatever that first step is for you, that's what needs to happen, relatively as quickly as possible. You meet somebody at an event. How many times do you hear you go to an event, right? You come back with 100 business cards, and those business cards just sit on your desk for a few months because you're busy and you're not following up with all the people you met. So timing is of the essence. And if they're top of mind, that's when they're most likely to have a positive conversation with you.
Yeah, especially at conferences, you meet someone in person. Maybe you went out to dinner, or you
Hmm.
grabbed a drink at the bar, or whatever the case may be. That starts the conversation. But as time passes on, we say, over and over again in this industry, time kills all deals. So, you meet them, you wait a month or two or three to reconnect with them. It's like, well, who is that? Like, I met a lot of people at this conference. Like, I don't even remember that person. So once you're top of mind, yeah, reach out directly and be like, hey, it was great to meet you at XYZ conference. And, you know, even just to say hi, or like I said, here's something I thought might be interesting to you. Or, hey, let's connect for a quick intro call on Zoom and see what opportunities we have to work together.
Hmm.
So let's say you do that and you set up a meeting and it goes great, but just really nothing happened from there. Is this another pivot point as to where, some leads might fall off because you've connected, but you haven't really landed them as a client yet?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that most people should be doing, and everybody doesn't, because sometimes you just sort of, shooting the shit, so to speak, right? You're just kind of chatting and you're not qualifying them. So in that call, I mean, the really thing you need to be doing is, even if there's not a fit today, is could there be a fit in the future? So I always tell our clients, is it a fit not now, or is it a not a fit ever? And that's an important distinction that I think a lot of people forget to recognize and realize, when they're meeting new people and prospective clients. If it's a not a fit never, then there's no need to follow up. But if it's not a fit right now, there has to be some type of follow up. Now, if you have a CRM system or some type of platform that can do a cadence, like a drip campaign or an email sequence, then that's a great area where you can just automate that. You could say, okay, put them on a tickler. They're not ready yet. They want me to check back in next year. Every 3 months, every 2 months, send them an email. And it's not an email, are you ready to talk? Like I said before, it's educational content. And then also have a phone call in between there, or make a note. I personally call a lot of people over the holidays and right before the holidays. Everybody usually calls at the holidays. I call like a week or two before. And so do things like that. Give a reason to call. Or, maybe they're into some sports and you took a note of that and their team just won. I mean, my team just won, the Knicks just won the championship. So,
Mm.
if anybody knew about me, maybe they'd be reaching out and saying, hey, that's awesome. Congrats. So those are the things that are important that are definitely getting missed, I think, by a lot of people.
Mhm. And you said it a couple of times. I think the important thing, what you're saying is, yeah, you don't always be too salesy, pushy. Say, hey, when are you gonna sell your company? When are you gonna sell the company? Like, yeah, just give them information. Just check in, just to check in and say hi, how they're doing, and that stuff goes a long way. But what is the cadence of that? So, it's not now, but it's later. You
Hmm.
said, get on a newsletter drip campaign, calls, like all that combined. Is it monthly? Is it every other month? Is it twice a year? Like, what do you recommend as far as just follow up cadence, regardless of
Yeah.
what
So it
avenue that is?
really, it's really about the sales cycle. So let's say, we're saying, okay, it might take a year for that person to convert over. I would say that sending them some type of email every 2 months is perfectly normal. But I think in between that, you want to at least have one or two phone calls, during the course of a year. Maybe you're calling every 6 months, just sort of, I hate to use the word checking in, but you're just, don't say it to them, but you are just
Yeah.
checking in. All right. And so because they want to hear your voice. And the reality is that everybody has competitors. I have competitors, you have competitors, Nick. And so a lot of competitors are not calling. They're not picking up the phone. They're not going on LinkedIn. They're not making those highly personalized touch points. And that's what's going to set you apart from everybody else. And so if you can do that, and even if your system reminds you to be like, hey, Nick, call Jason today. It's been 6 months since you last spoke to him. That's all you need, right? You just need that little gentle nudge reminder to call Jason and see what's going on. And I think also too, which I didn't add before, which I think is valuable, and especially I think in the M&A world, as amongst other industries, even if there's not a fit, maybe there's another way you can help them. Like you just mentioned before about like financial advisors and all these different referral partners. And I say, hey, Nick, like I understand you're not ready to sell your business today. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Or, hey, you mentioned something like I know a great plumber that could fix that plumbing issue that you had to reschedule a call for because you said there's a problem, in the factory. Like, would you like me to make an introduction? And so there are other ways you can help people and show the value without directly getting them as a client. And to me, I think in a long-term sales cycle, being that resource makes you, indispensable, because now it's like, okay, Jason isn't just there when I need him to sell my business, but Jason's a resource guy. He knows a ton of people, and the people that he's referred to me have been really great. So why am I not likely to call Jason again in the future if I need something, rather than just going on, Google or going on Facebook groups trying to find somebody that can help me?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. What do you think? What do you think is more the problem? Is it the process, or the technology, or the people in play, or what is typically the bigger issue?
Usually the biggest issue is the process, then the lack of a process. That's number one. If the process is there, then the second option is usually that it's the adoptability of whatever process it is, whether it be a piece of technology or a spreadsheet, and that nobody's using it or nobody's using it consistently. And so what we find is if the owner or a manager isn't overseeing that, they don't have eyes on it, they're not doing it themselves, it's very easy for people to fall back into bad habits and not do the things they should be doing.
How do you get that buy-in? Like, what are some tips or tricks as a business owner, as a leader, to get everybody in the business to buy into that the process?
So if we're already working with a client, it's in the proof of the numbers. So really quick story, and if it's not, I'll tell you another version of that. But I have a client that does about 1,000 estimates a year. They're in the home service space, and after about 6 weeks, they sell roofs to residential and commercial buildings. So after about 6 weeks of trying to, you go to the house, you do all this time and effort to put a proposal together. After 6 weeks goes by, they're like, oh, you know what? They probably hired somebody else and they're not interested. We're just going to move on. That was their attitude for like 15 years, 20 years. That was their attitude. And I was like, well, that's crazy, because what if they just don't have the money, or what if they're waiting for the tax refund, or whatever, right? I mean, anything could change that mindset. And so I put together an automated campaign like we're talking about, just to tickle them, right? Just say, hey, it's been a couple months since we've been to the house. The colonial home was beautiful. We kind of personalized the emails automatically. Did you hire anybody? And if you haven't, can we still help you with that project? And if you did hire somebody, let us know why. And so we started getting feedback of why they lost deals. But the magical thing that happened, Nick, that 15 to 18 months was the sweet spot. We started closing deals for them all through automation. And they closed almost $4 million in revenue in 2025, all through automation, all from deals that probably would have completely fallen through the cracks because they closed over a year later after the estimator went out there. And
Mhm.
so that, and the client, is like, well, do we need still doing this? I'm like, well, why wouldn't we turn it off? You're making money doing it, right? Like it doesn't. And so, to the opposite point of that, how do you get buy-in? You get buy-in by finding the one or two people in a company that are gung-ho, that are enthusiastic, that want to make their job and be able to work, I should say, smarter and not, harder, right? I mean, it's still a cliche saying. And you find those one or two people and say, listen, I'm going to train you. And meaning, me and my team would train them and say, this is what we need to do. And that we would check in with them every month, have meetings with them. And by doing that and getting them to see the value and become the rock star, the rest of the team is going to want to gravitate towards them. So whenever we start working with a client, and if they have, 5, 10, 20 salespeople, we never train everybody at once. We just almost never do that because we want to work out the kinks. We want to make sure that what we're being told is actually real, and this is how the salespeople work, and this is their, the process that they're going to follow, and we have to make any changes. But once we get those few people going, Nick, usually within a few weeks, maybe a couple months after that, like everybody's like, biting at the bit, like, hey, can I get on the system? Like, I want to start getting these results too.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Yeah, because I think you said you can have the greatest tools in place, the greatest process in place, but if no one's going to actually do it, then it's like, well, it's all for naught.
Big pile of expensive digital dust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned CRM, that seems to be we talk about one of those technology tools. How are people misusing it? Why should companies be using a CRM as opposed to an Excel document? And maybe where do they misuse or misunderstand the benefits and the capabilities of a CRM?
2 words, Nick: shiny object. So the reason is that they're buying software, specifically a CRM, because of its features and its benefits and all the cool things it could do. But what do they not have? They don't have the process. So they buy a piece of software that's got these amazing features, or at least they think they do, but they're not solving any problems. They're just expecting the software to work out of the gate and do this magical wand that's going to change everything in their business and fix all their problems. No software will do that. Not even, $200,000 a year for Salesforce won't fix that problem without the process. So that's the biggest mistake is going in without the process, going in without knowing what your needs are, what your challenges are. I always say never go to a demo for a piece of software unless you have very specific challenges and needs and questions to ask the person that's giving you the demo. Because otherwise, they're going to give you the same demo they give to 10,000 other people. And it's going to be a generic demo that meets none of your demands. It's just touting a few aspects of the platform. The other thing, too, that's really important people don't think about is support. My sort of like objective, view on this, Nick, is the cheaper, the lower the cost. I don't like the word cheaper. The lower the cost of a piece of software, generally the support is really terrible. So, if you are buying software, even if you're spending, a few $100s or thousands of dollars a month for it, who's going to help you with it if you have questions? Are you going to be able to get on a video call? Are you going to be able to get on a phone? Or do you have to submit a ticket and wait a week to get a response? And the response will probably not answer your question. They got to wait another week to get another response. That's not functional, right? You can't operate that way. So finding out what type of support is offered is extremely important piece that I think majority of people don't ask that question.
What about just your marketing efforts and deal origination and those two, going from marketing to landing a client?
Mm-hmm.
How do those align so that you can have more or better warmed up leads into the pipeline as opposed to, I don't know if this is even, this is probably a cold lead or whatever.
Yeah, well, there's 2 pieces. If you're talking about like marketing attribution, like you always want to make sure that whatever got the person in the door is somehow tagged on that person so you know where they came from, so you could check the quality of the leads, right, and the volume. Facebook is a notorious platform for sending a ton of leads, but most of the times they're garbage, and so it doesn't matter about the volume, it's about the quality. And so, when it comes down to how can marketing help drive better leads? Well, I think you have to think about, I'll give you a great example. So we've been testing a bunch of our own marketing. We always do different marketing here at Cultivize. And so I hired a new person this year to head up some of that pay-per-click, the PPC ads for us. And one thing I noticed early on in a few weeks of the campaign running, he was bidding on the word CRM. And it was bringing in a lot of traffic, okay, but it was bringing in the wrong traffic because CRM could be anything. It could be they needed help. They just wanted to have a question about their own CRM, right? And they just typed in CRM. It wasn't specific enough. Whereas someone typing in CRM consultant or CRM consultant, New York or whatever it might be, I'm going to get somebody that's looking for a CRM consultant. So the point of that story is that the more direct marketing you do, the better the quality of those leads are going to be. You mentioned conferences are huge in the M&A space. So if you're going to a conference that's more broad, and let's say you're going to like an HR conference because you're trying to find people in other companies, you're less likely to have success versus if you're going to some of the conference that's designed for business owners that are, $10 million in revenue and up, that might be in a position to sell their business. So I would say be strategic and make sure that whatever marketing you're doing, it's attracting your audience. What we call the ICP, right? The ideal client profile. If your ideal client profile isn't in that marketing universe, it's probably the wrong marketing channel.
Do you have an example of maybe a client or a business that you helped, excuse me, or dealing with an issue, maybe before and after of tightening up their funnel, lead to to something that saw measurable impacts or positivity to closing deals?
Yeah, I mean, well, the one for sure was the roofing client, right? About them
Yep.
being able to close these deals. The other one I would say also is let me think about that for 1 second. That's a little bit of a different use case. So the one I would say that would be the most quick thought. All right, so here's another one. So this company I was working with, they, believe it or not, weren't even as advanced enough to be using spreadsheets. When I met them, they had manila folders on their desk and they were writing everything down, right, on paper. And so when they wanted to, and these were customers that they could potentially sell back to. In other words, it wasn't just a one-off sale. They could do a bit more business with these customers, but they didn't have any of that data. And so what I also learned was that they were not only taking all the inbound stuff on paper, all their contracts, everything they were doing was all on paper. People were like scanning and emailing or faxing stuff to them. Nothing was digitized at all in this company, which was completely shocking. They've been around for like, about 67 years, but they were running it like they were, running it 50 years ago. And so the transformation we made for them, Nick, was to digitize everything. So everything that came through went into a CRM. They never had one. So now they have a visual dashboard of where everything lies, the people that are in conversation, the people that are proposals been sent out to, etc. But we've also digitized all their contracts. So now that when somebody requests a contract and they didn't sign it yet, we could automate an email going out a reminder saying, "Hey Nick, we sent you the contract a week ago. Do you have any questions?" And conversely, when they fill out the contract, we know what they need. So now going forward, we can say, okay, because you needed this in 2025, you might need this other thing going forward. And we could automate and segment all that data together.
Mm-hmm. What are a couple of top 3 takeaways that you think our audience should consider, should think about, maybe could implement now that is going to, really draw a big impact into their sales funnel and their
Yeah,
process?
love that question, Nick. So the easiest one to do is take out a piece of paper. And if you're in the car or on the treadmill, just do it when you get back to the office or at home, but take out a piece of paper and start writing down what you believe your process to be. So when you get that lead, what happens first, what happens second, who handles it, and also write down how long an average does it take to go from step 1 to step 2 and to step 3, and your best, educated guesses. And that's where you're going to start seeing those leaky holes in the bucket that we talked about earlier. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing you can do is look at your current systems. What are you doing? What tools are you using? Is the team using those tools effectively? How often are you monitoring that? And do you have a way to know if they're not doing what they should be doing? That's extremely important. If you're a bigger organization listening and you may not have a grasp on even different departments and what technology they have, get a hold of a bank statement. I can't tell you how many times, Nick, I've seen companies they're paying for 3 different CRMs because the marketing team bought one, the sales team bought another, and another operations bought a third system. And they could all do the exact same thing, but they're paying 3 separate bills, and they don't realize because it's different budgets, right, in the company. So that might be something to look at too. You might be paying for things you don't even need and aren't even using.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question, Jason, this has been amazing. There are long sales cycles in M&A. To
Mhm.
find a business owner when they are ready to sell is like finding a needle in a haystack. So there's a lot of nurturing that goes on. There's a lot of so it's the long game, not something that's gonna always necessarily turn into a client in the short term. What are some recommendations, some best practices, or tips or tricks that really to stay focused on the process? Understand it's a long term plan, but to stick with it.
Well, it's all about the time and energy, right? So, you mentioned the conference, and I'm going to go back to it because I think it's a great example, Nick. You drove or flew, maybe if you had to a conference. So you're spending time and money to go to that conference to meet people, right? Maybe take them out for dinner for that drink. You're spending money, right? You come back with that stack of business cards. Shame on you if you haven't built a relationship with a good percentage of those people that you started a dialogue with at the event. And so that's such an important piece of this, is that you yourself, right, as a salesperson listening or someone responsible for growing your M&A practice, what are you doing to keep yourself accountable to say, where's my time going? Because all our time is valuable, and if you're doing a lot of networking, or if you're putting yourself out there to build these relationships, because the M&A world is all about these relationships, as we both mentioned, right, in the conversation today. What are you doing to build upon those relationships? Think of the world of, like, when I don't, Nick, are you married at all, or?
I am married.
Okay, so I'm married too. So I've been married almost 20 years. Do we date our wife once and then marry her the next time we saw her? No, right?
No.
I mean, it's a process, right? You go on dates, you get to know people, you find chemistry, you find commonalities, and then the click happens, or the timing is right, and then you get married, right? And so business deals are no different than that. What I find is a lot of times people don't want to date; they want to go straight to marriage, And so it's an important process, because you got to kind of learn about each other, and when you
Mhm.
do that in a meaningful way, it does, I believe, make a huge difference.
Mhm. And those are things you can do during that long sales cycle and nurturing and whatnot is to get to know them better. But also, like I said, don't always have an agenda when you're looking to talk to them, and be helpful.
Yeah.
And if you're providing them with tools and resources or little things that they should know about their industry, or hey, businesses just sold for this multiple, I thought you might be interested in hearing that or whatever. But yeah, it is a long term proposition in most cases. So staying diligent, but also having that process in place so you can connect with them on a regular basis and not go 6 months, 12 months without even a reach out
Yeah.
or a conversation or anything like that.
The other thing too, I would just add to this. I mean, it's an old technology, and there's new tools out there, but like something like Google Alerts. If you're working on M&A deals for sizable businesses, then put an alert, for their company into your feed, and you'll get an email automatically if there's ever a press article, if there's some news story about them, if there's something about the owner. And that's a great reason to reach back out to them. Hey, congratulations! I just saw you open your 30th location, or congratulations! I just saw you hired this great person. I mean, LinkedIn Navigator is going to let you know when there's updates in a company. So use the tools that are out there as a reason to wanting to reach out. That's a great conversation starter that isn't salesy at all.
Mhm. Anything with AI that you guys are working on or seeing? I know that's a big topic right now.
Huge. Yeah, a lot. I mean, so I would say there's two pieces of it. So one is on the prospecting side. I'll give you a really quick example. I have a commercial broker, a small firm in Manhattan, and he only does commercial, but he wants to build relationships with residential brokers that are doing deals of like north of like a few $1 million in a certain geographic area of Manhattan, that he could just walk over and be like, "Hey, you around? Want to meet for coffee?" And so what we're doing with Claude specifically, and I get nothing from Claude to promote them, but is we built a very complex research tool in Claude. And what the research tool does is it finds all of the brokers that fit his profile, his ICP, be in a geographic area of he's like between, like, I think like Canal Street and, like, well, people that know Manhattan, but like, you know, downtown to like midtown, across east and west, because that's all he wants to talk to. And what our tool does that we built for him, and this is like a one-off tool, this isn't something we sell. We build these tools all the time for clients, is it'll go research 50 brokers at a time and find all the deals that they're working on, the past deals that they've closed, information about their team, their name, their email, their physical address, their LinkedIn profile. And then what I do on top of that, once I have approval from the client, is I create a highly personalized email for each individual person. So essentially, the AI builds 50 emails for him that will say, "Hey, Nick, like, congratulations, such and such, property. Like, I saw this the other day, in the news." And it all is super specific to you, right? And to something you've done. And then what he does is he copies those and puts it into his own email, and he just sends them out. And he does, maybe he does like 15 a day, something like that, not a huge number. But he's handpicking people that he really wants to have relationships with.
Yeah.
And so that's just one example of how AI, that would have taken somebody, dozens of hours every given week to do that. Now we can do it within minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Another example of AI that's really helpful is to enrich data. A lot of times you meet people, like if the conference, for example, you may not know their LinkedIn profile. Could you go to LinkedIn and look them up? Yeah, but that could be, 400 Jason Kramers, and you got to go sift through them and find them and apply filters. So AI is like another tool that you can use to just enrich the data you already have about people. One example quickly on that is I built a tool for Cultivize where when we're talking, let's say you and I met, Nick, or we were about to meet, all I would do is put in your name. If I had your LinkedIn profile, I'd put that in and your website, and that's it. My tool will then go through and do a deep research and build me like a 15-page document. Everything about your company, about your team, about all the technology you use. It scours the website looking for any issues as far as like lead tracking go. And then it recommends things I could talk about with you when we have that conversation. And that tool has been like huge because, and this is actually funny. I was talking to a prospective client a few weeks ago, and I was like, I'll just use like, two made up names, but I'm like, so Dave and Jerry are like the two top sales guys. He's like, how do you know Dave and Jerry? I'm like, well, because they're mentioned in like hundreds of Google reviews you have online and all your customers are praising them. I didn't find that, right? The research tool found that. And so I was able to just throw out names like that. I've done my homework on his company, which broke the barrier and allowed us to dive into the real conversation.
Yeah. So many use cases for AI, and it's just,
yeah, I could go on and on. That's a whole other show.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to embrace it, and you gotta, it's a real thing, and it can be extremely helpful, save you a ton of time. So be more prepared for meetings and things like that. So
especially on the business development side.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, Jason, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Where can our listeners find out more about Cultivize, the work that you guys are doing, or if they want to connect with you directly?
Yeah, the easiest thing to remember, Nick, is to go to afterthelead.com. That's after the lead, simple 3 words. On there, you can connect with me on social. We got some great information there and some downloads that people can take away from the show as my thank you to your listeners for tuning in.
All right. Make sure to check out that website. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Like, share, and comment on this episode. Pass it on to anybody who you think might benefit from our conversation here today. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Click that notification button to make sure you get that notification every time a new episode airs. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.